In the deep green heart of Central America, there's a place where the forest doesn't just grow, it swallows. And sometimes, it swallows entire worlds. Near the end of the 1600s, a Spanish missionary and his exhausted companions staggered through the tropics hungry, thirsty, and half lost in a maze of green. They weren't just crossing wilderness. They were crossing the edge of Spanish control and stepping into a world that resisted being claimed. Their goal had been political as much as spiritual: persuade the last independent Maya kingdom to submit. But the negotiation collapsed, and now the group fled scraped by thorns, cut by stone, driven onward by fear and fatigue. Then, from the top of a rise, the jungle broke its own illusion. Above the canopy an angular shadow, not a hill, not a cliff, a geometry that nature doesn't make. A staircase half-choked by roots climbing toward a platform that once held kings, priests, and firelight. The travelers didn't understand what they were looking at, but they knew one thing. This wasn't a forgotten hut. This was a capital. The city we now call Tikal would later be recognized as one of the greatest urban centers in the ancient Americas, a place of towering pyramids, royal courts, and a population that once numbered in the tens of thousands. But the most haunting part isn't that Tikal existed. It's that after centuries of power, it fell quiet. And when it did, it didn't leave behind a neat explanation. No final inscription that says, "Here is why we ended." No single diary. No last speech. Just stone. And silence. Welcome. In this video, we're tracing the rise and collapse of the classic Maya, not as a myth, but as a human story. We'll follow how cities like Tikal grew into astonishing power, why their world was uniquely fragile, and how stress-slow, quiet, compounding stress can break even the most brilliant societies. Because this isn't just the story of ruins. It's the story of people who believed their world would last. The Maya weren't just builders. They were record-keeper storytellers in stone and ink. They wrote in glyphs that could capture names, dates, dynasties, wars, rituals, astronomy, a complex script that grew into one of the great writing traditions of the ancient world. But most of it didn't survive. After conquest, countless texts were destroyed, and with them, centuries of memory. So the Maya collapse became a puzzle with missing pieces. A civilization that could calculate time with astonishing precision, yet had much of its own story burned away. It is important to get one thing right. The Maya were not a single unified empire in the way people imagine. They were a network of city-states, each with its own ruler, its own alliances, its own rivalries. More like a region of competing capitals than one centralized kingdom. They shared language families, religion, artistic styles, and a deep belief that time was cyclical, that patterns repeat, and the past speaks to the future. Their cities celebrated sport, trade, ritual, status. And their rulers didn't just govern. They performed leadership as intermediaries between people and the sacred forces of the world. That detail matters, because when the world stopped behaving the way it was supposed to, the political system didn't just wobble, it cracked. The Maya lowlands were a difficult place to build permanence. Rain didn't reliably gather into rivers. Water often disappeared underground into limestone caves, leaving the surface vulnerable to dry seasons and sudden drought. So the Maya engineered survival. Reservoirs, channels, plastered basins, controlled flow systems. A whole civilization built around holding on to water before the land could take it away. And then there was agriculture. Tropical soils can be thin and fragile. Fertility can vanish quickly if land is overworked. And food storage in humid conditions is a constant fight against rot and loss. In other words, this was not an easy landscape that supported growth by default. It was a landscape that demanded constant maintenance and punished mistakes. When Tikal and its rivals rose to power, they created more than monuments. They created momentum. More people meant more fields. More fields meant more cleared forest. More construction demanded more lime plaster, which demanded more fuel, which demanded more wood. Growth became a loop. Power gives population, gives building, gives resource demand, gives environmental strain. And the terrifying thing about loops like this is that they can feel stable, right up until the moment they aren't. Archaeologists track parts of Maya history through dated monuments, because when kings are confident, they carve time into stone. And then the dates begin to disappear, not all at once, not with one obvious apocalypse, but like a string of lights along a dark road. One city goes silent, then another, then another. Construction slows. Royal projects end mid-work. Some palaces show signs of burning. Some centers get hastily fortified, not because the Maya forgot how to build, but because the world around them was becoming harder to hold together. And in many places, when the center failed, people didn't rebuild it. They left. So what likely happened? Not one thing, a convergence. Environmental strain reduced agricultural resilience. Rainfall swings, especially severe drought periods, could turn strain into crisis. Food stress undermined the authority of rulers whose legitimacy was tied to prosperity and cosmic order. As trust collapsed, so did coordination. And when coordination collapses in a system that depends on coordination, cities unravel. Then comes migration. People fleeing failing centers, increasing pressure on places that are still holding on. A chain reaction. It's not mystical disappearance. It's something more human and more frightening. A complex society becoming unable to pay the ongoing cost of its own complexity. Imagine what it would feel like to walk away from a city your grandparents helped build. To pass beneath temples that once held festivals and proclamations, now quiet enough to hear insects between stones. Some people may have returned occasionally, leaving offerings, marking walls, using sacred places long after kings were gone. But eventually, even those visits stopped, and the forest did what it always does. It reclaimed, not with rage, with patience. Tikal didn't vanish because it was weak. It vanished because even brilliance has limits, especially in a world where water, soil, and stability can shift. The stones remain, not as a warning carved in words, but as a question carved in architecture. What does a society do when the systems that fed it stop feeding it? If you want, in the next episode, we can follow one Maya city in extreme close-up and reconstruct the collapse year by year, ruler by ruler, drought by drought.